Righty, 10:02 on the fan. What's going on, everybody? How are you? It's the Tiki and Tierney Show. All right, got that little thing out of the way. Super Bowl, hey, Jets and Giants season can start. Here we go. I got to tell you, listen, Tiki. First of all, the game was awesome. There were so many great plays, offense, defense, points, tight game. Theater was awesome. But I just got to lay something out here. So you think about the way we start our viewing and investment process as football fans, right? Mm-hmm. When's it really, well, first of all, it never ends, but when's it really ramp up? Free agency, which is in March. Then it rolls into the draft, which is in April. All the conversations. Should they get this guy? Do they move up? Who likes this quarterback? It doesn't end. Then you get to training camp, and it's like, all right, they're on the field. They're in shells. There's my guys. Let's see how they look. Then you start gearing up for fantasy football, right? And depending upon how serious you are about it, that could take some time. Then we sit there, and we love most of it. 17 games, 18 weeks, games on Monday, games on Thursday, games on Saturdays eventually late, games all day Sunday into midnight, right? Then you're playing in different countries. You are playing on holidays, and the season ends. And I hate to be the guy who takes. I loved everything until the way it ended. How do we fix this?
Yeah,
you can't call that.
It's hard to, because it is a foul, right? It's hard to opine that they shouldn't call it because it is a foul. But I feel like in other sports, hockey is this way. I don't know. Baseball doesn't have the way to do this. Basketball is a little bit this way. At some point, you have to swallow the whistle on a call that you could probably call every single play. It's just like holding. We call holding, it's a holding. Yeah, you can call a holding every play of every single football game in the NFL because in some capacity, somebody, whether it's an offensive lineman or whether somebody's holding all the time. But when do you call it? And it has to be egregious. So to me, the reason that this Super Bowl, which was fantastic, and I think the right team won. Patrick Mahomes wins his second MVP. He's amazing. He's the future face of the National Football League. He's got a second league MVP and a Super Bowl MVP. I read this morning. Is he already in the Hall of Fame?
Well, he's finally better than Eli. Huh? Yeah, right. Is that what it comes down to?
Yeah, yes, he's already in the Hall of Fame. Patrick Mahomes is. But when you think back on this game, at least in the short term, probably not 2 years from now, but in the short term, all anybody is going to talk about is not the fact that Jalen Hurts could have been the MVP on a losing team because he threw for 300 yards and rushed for 3 touchdowns and 70 yards. If he hadn't fumbled, that actually might have happened because that's what got them back into the game, the Kansas City Chiefs. But Patrick Mahomes was sublime in the second half. The Eagles were grossly outcoached by Andy Reid in the second half. They scored on the same exact play on opposite sides of the field. It was unbelievable. And so you give the Chiefs credit, but the way that it ended makes you say, man, I hate that a guy in black and white stripes determined the ending of a game that could have been and should have ended in a classic fashion. Mm-hmm. With Jalen Hurts, who, again, like I said, could have been the MVP on a losing team with a chance to go up the field and beat the Kansas City. It didn't happen. We got robbed of what could have been an epic ending because the officiating was so ticky-tack in a moment where it shouldn't have been. This is personal to me because this happened in my Super Bowl.
You guys against the Ravens.
And back in 2000.
Was it Hamilton?
Yep, Keith Hamilton, D-tackle. You run a play fake to the running back. Guess what? Sometimes you fool the defensive lineman and they want to tackle you. Keith Hamilton tackles Jamal Lewis. Jason Yarmstead intercepts Trent Dilfer's pass, returns it for a touchdown. We're in that game if that happens.
Nope, there's a whistle. There's a flag on the field.
Defensive holding on a running back on a play-action pass. Come on.
Geez.
I mean, technically, is it holding? Yeah. Do you call that in the Super Bowl? No.
I'm with you.
Just like they shouldn't have called this one.
Yeah, we're still going 23 years later. Listen, I get it. Now, Chief fans won't process this as cheap or unearned, clearly, nor should they. Eagles fans, I know that the one that they had years ago or a couple of years ago doesn't mitigate the sting from last night's loss. Just look at the city of Philadelphia. Yeah. It was a ravaged wreck last night. It was a wreck before the game.
That's right. They were flipping
over the cars.
I saw that.
What the hell's wrong with people?
I don't know.
What is wrong with people?
Good riddance, Philly. You booed my brother when he got into the Hall of Fame. Kiss my ass.
Yeah, Teak, I never do this. Oh, yeah, I never do this. Tiki texted us this morning, last night, and you guys know Tiki by now. He's usually very calm and very very poised. He goes, bleep the Eagles, booing Rondé. God don't like ugly! Exclamations. Good riddance.
Exactly.
Telling the Eagles to get back in the hole. I'll tell you the other thing, too. I can't take these halftime shows anymore. I just can't. I can't stand them. It's too long.
It is long.
29 minutes. 29 minutes, right? It wasn't even that good for me. It's subjective, so I'm not going to waste anybody's time breaking down Rihanna's performance, although to do that pregnant is quite amazing.
Yes.
But between that, which takes forever, and the grass, and this is a problem. See, this is where the NFL confounds me sometimes. So they do so much right. They've got seemingly a limitless treasure trove of resources, and they can't get the grass right.
Yeah.
So they grow the grass for 2 weeks before they tray it out. They get some sun. They tray it in. They tray it out. They soil it. They whatever they do. And then they paint it, and everybody's slipping. I mean, Elliott could have busted his ankle on the kickoff.
He could have.
How do you let that happen?
Yeah, you'd left it.
The details.
Because the aesthetic is more important than the functionality.
You know what?
That's what it comes down to.
Sadly, I think that you're right. I think that you're right.
I don't hate to keep going back to 2000, but that's what happened in our Super Bowl. They tried that Greg Norman grass down in Tampa and at Buck Stadium. And it was terrible. It was slippery as hell. Not that it mattered. I mean, the Ravens just beat the crap out of us, but it was terrible. And so they do this often where they just kind of experiment at the wrong moment.
Yeah.
Experiment like week 5.
Yeah.
Don't experiment in the Super Bowl.
Now let the USFL do it.
Yeah,
We've been hit with those
exactly.
commercials a little.
Right.
Let them mess around. Then
Yeah.
if it works, then maybe we'll take it. If not, we won't.
Here's the big issue for the NFL. Not that it's a big issue because we're still going to watch. We're still going to be engaged. But all season long, we've had this conversation about refereeing, whether it's, this bad call, this, incomplete pass that should have been completed. And, what's the replay system for if they're still going to screw it up? We got all of these mechanisms in place to get calls right. And we often get them wrong. But at some point, we have to start thinking about the refereeing errors as part of the game, right? And maybe there's an argument to get rid of all of this technology and just let it be played, right? The way that it's seen, because watching that final play in real time, at least the final deciding play with the penalty on James Bradbury, watching that in real time, you're not saying that's a definite penalty. What you're saying is, yeah, it's a hole, but it's within a couple of yards of the line of scrimmage. Maybe you should get away with that one. Maybe he should get away with that. Just like, he probably got away with it in week 5 and no one called it. Yeah. No one saw it, right? Why are you calling it now? And why does it have to be a talking point in a game that was pretty epic? I mean, there was 73 points scored in a game, which is not a lot of defense.
Yeah, your tone didn't. You didn't love that many points.
Look, 2 defenses that were supposed to be great didn't have. What was there? 1 sack?
The Eagles didn't give up any.
Well,
did they?
No, I think they did,
none.
but it was only because Jalen Hurts scrambled and didn't get back to the line of scrimmage.
I think he barely got to the line. I don't think they gave one up officially. Either way, it was 1 or 0.
It was hardly any sacks. There was no defense. There was 73 points scored. But if you're going to have that kind of game, just let it be that kind of game.
That's true.
Don't legislate it and make yourself a part of the conversation with under 2 minutes to go in a football game. That's just bad, and it's hard to swallow.
I'm with you. Hey, we're inside of our Town Fair Tire studio. Our friends at Town Fair remind you that you always get the guaranteed lowest price on name brand tires from Connecticut to Maine. Nobody beats Town Fair Tire. Nobody. Look at it this way before we get to these calls, all right? So let's say you mentioned week 5. Take week 5. The Jets are playing whomever. The Giants are playing whomever. Jets and the Giants are trailing at that juncture. And one of our receivers, runs the same route. The same thing that Bradbury did occurs.
Yeah.
They swallow it. They don't throw the flag. Are we getting on the air the next day and framing that as an egregious miss?
No.
The answer is no.
Yes.
Now, of course, it's going to come up, especially if it's in the final minute of the game and it's a one-possession game, sure. But that's what drives you nuts. You didn't have to call it. And I think, Teague, a lot of these referees, because think about this. If you don't throw a flag, there's really no recourse at that point. If you do, certain things could be, not depends where it is in the game. Challenged, reversed. You can confer. You know what? Upon further review, we're going to pick the flag up. But I almost feel like if they don't throw a flag, they think that, and they probably will be graded out more harshly by the NFL. So they're almost compelled to be proactive with the flags because certain things could be reversed the other way. But if you throw the flag, it's there.
Yeah, they're just showing it again right now. And so I'm watching it. And it's maybe Juju Smith-Schuster is disrupted by a half a step.
Yep.
Right? Because he's changing direction. So what is he? Is he actually being prevented from running his route? The answer is no. Right? Maybe the timing is screwed up with Pat Mahomes, but Pat Mahomes could have waited another half a second and thrown a better throw, right? When I first saw it, in my mind, I'm saying, God, Pat missed that one bad. And then you go back and you see it's all timing. It has nothing to do with what Juju Smith-Schuster's route looks like in the moment. It's just Pat Mahomes having done this multiple times in practice or in games where he's like, all right, 1, 2, 3 in my head. I'm just throwing it to a spot. Juju's supposed to be there, right? So he's not reading the play. He's just throwing it to a spot that Juju's supposed to be at. And when I watched what James Bradbury did, I mean, he almost helped him stop and go back the other way. So in real time, I'm listening to Greg Olsen.
He did a good job, Olsen.
Call this, and I forget who's the ref on site. Sterator?
No, that wasn't. Was that Piera?
Piera, yeah.
CBS.
Piera.
It wasn't
CBS,
Sterator.
Yeah, Sterator is CBS. It's stuck in my mind, but it's Pereira, right? Pereira says, "Oh, that's a hold. You got to call it a hold." And Greg Olsen, as much as I disagree with how he calls games sometimes, he nailed this.
He did.
He said, this is not the moment to call. And he's like, that's kind of ticky-tack. I don't know if I call that in this moment. Greg Olsen was dead on it because nobody wants to see a game of this magnitude at that juncture, under 2 minutes left in the game, be decided by a guy in black and white stripes saying, you got just a little. If you would have let that tug go a half a second earlier, I wouldn't have called it. Right? That's not what you need in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? It was ticky-tack, and in real time, it didn't matter to anything.
877-337-6666. You mentioned Olsen. Hearty shout out to our boy Kevin Burkhardt. Local kid, great dude. I got to laugh, too. I heard Gio saying this morning, and I saw a lot of it on Facebook, and less on Twitter. But he's right. The amount of people that dug up old photos with them and Burkhardt. I used to cover, I used to sit in the press box with Kevin Burkhardt. And I know it's coming from a good place, right? But
of course.
It's like, all right, you're not the story. All right, so, I mean, we've all come across paths with Kevin Burkhardt, every one of us in the business, some more than others, whatever. I just don't get that. Gio nailed it. People die, or people, I don't want to overstate it, but he was not wrong when he said that. I saw that all weekend on Facebook. I'm like, enough. We know you know Burkhardt. We're all rooting for Burkhardt. Jersey kid, selling cars, did great, and a great guy. But enough with the Facebook self-love. You have nothing to do with the game, nor did you inspire Kevin Burkhardt to go from selling cars to calling the Super Bowl. What a moment for him, though. He was good. All right, let's get Henry first up in Brentwood. What's happening, Henry?
Hey, Brandon. I'm just when I called the game last night. I'm not a Jets fan, so I have no stake in the game, no money. I just feel like you have rules for a reason, though. It's always subjective. I get it. But then it's like the guy can even do something more egregious. And what are you going to say? Don't call a penalty?
Well, I mean, if it was egregious, then you call it.
Yep.
But that was not an egregious hold. It just wasn't. I mean, I played the game for a long time. There's a lot more that's gotten away with than that. And I understand it's in the moment. I understand. Appreciate your call, Henry. You got a little feedback. I know that, referees are points of emphasis or whatever the heck they talk about with these referees. At some point,
I don't know. Maybe he was in the script.
You're right. You are not injecting yourself into that game unless it's egregious in that moment. Right? I mean, maybe that should be the point of emphasis to referees. Unless if it's a deciding moment in a game, and you'll know it. Trust me, when it's like a moment where it's a deciding moment in a game. Do not inject yourself unless it's egregious.
Listen, I do have a line of delineation, and I think this is the sensible way to look at it. And you hear it both ways, but I think most of us reside in this part of the bubble that I'm about to explain. And this happens a lot in the NBA. And you hear it. It's a popular refrain. If it's a foul, even if it's a foul, don't call it where you're going to decide the game. Minute left, 37 seconds left, 22, whatever the situation might be. unless it is clearly player altering.
Yes,
That's it.
Like the hit out of bounds on Patrick Mahomes 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That was egregious.
100%.
I mean, he's 2 steps out of bounds
Yep.
and you drill him. Of course you call that, right? That's an example of an egregious foul. But a ticky-tack foul that happens almost every single play. You don't think go watch like game tape of football. That happens every single play.
I'll tell you, there's one guy who doesn't do that as a corner.
Who's that?
Sauce. Let's get, there'll be no sauce shade. Let's get Gene here at Ridge. What's going on, Gene?
What's up, Gene?
Well, it's the same thing, Tiki. Plus, I love you guys' show.
Thank you.
I was a referee, and everybody says, well, you don't call a penalty in the last minute. But if it's a penalty, like last night's penalty was, like you said, marginal. But let's say, he doesn't call that. And, if you're a Kansas City Chief fan, they're going to say, well, you decided the game if Philadelphia comes back and wins. So it's a very touchy penalty. I agree with you on that. But, it was a penalty.
Yes, but when should you call it and when should you not? That's what I'm talking about, because ultimately we end up talking more about the penalty, as we are now, and like as every other show that's on television right now or in radio is talking about now. You're not talking about like the other important moments in this game, like Nick Sirianni on 3rd and 1 giving it to Jalen Hurts, and then when it didn't, they get a penalty, whatever happened, then he gives it to Jalen Hurts again, and he gets flustered and then fumbles it and gives the Kansas City Chiefs, who were dead in the water at that point.
They didn't have a lot of life.
They were dead in the water until Jalen Hurts fumbled that ball and Nick Bolton picked it up and returned it for a touchdown, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about a play that happens every single game, doesn't get called or does get called, but in that moment with a minute and whatever it was, 30-something seconds left, you just can't make that call. You just can't.